Welcome to the Teach Joyfully podcast, where we talk about all things elementary teaching with some mom stuff thrown in. I'm Lisa Burns, a teacher success coach, veteran elementary teacher, and mom of 5. I'll be your host. Thanks for joining me today. Today, let's talk about the power of expectations and how you speak to, speak about, and think about your students impacts their achievement. We all talk about having high expectations for our students, and that sounds great, except one of the things we don't talk about is how having high expectations requires high support levels as well. It's great to say we have high expectations for all students, but really, how do you get them there? Students cannot do this alone, we know that, but we have to find ways to support them. It sounds great, but in reality, what's it really like? Well, let me remind you that I get all of my students, regardless of background, language knowledge, socioeconomic level, and all those other factors to read and write at or above grade level by the end of the year, pretty much every year. Part of getting there is how and what I teach, but part of it is my words, my expectations, and my tone that I set in my classroom. In the beginning of the year, I start by obviously giving my expectations and explaining them to students, but I also set the tone. One of the things I do is talking to students about courage. It takes a lot of courage to answer when you're not 100% sure. But I tell my students that I'm asking you to be brave and try answering when you think you know at least part of the answer, but you're not completely sure. Because that's how we learn the very most in our lives and at school. This is something that is easy to say, but it's much harder to do. But I back it up by honoring that every day with my responses to my students, and that is a key piece. It's great to say that, but it's different to back it up with how I behave and what I say. And I explain this to students in a way that they can understand. Learning to ride a bike. When you learn to ride a bike, you have to stretch yourself and get out of your comfort zone to get on 2 wheels. And it is hard. And we have to fall and make mistakes all along the way in order to learn to be a good bike rider. Students can understand that. And they understand how much they've learned by the time they actually learn to ride a bike. So this is something that students can actually relate to, and it makes understanding this approximation, this idea of answering when you know kind of the answer, but not 100%, and how much you can grow and learn, and how quickly you can grow and learn if you'll just reach out and try. Then I back all that up by honoring their approximations every single day with my behavior and my words. And that is a key piece. So often we say things, but we don't back it up with our behaviors. And our behavior really does speak volumes about what we really value and what our expectations are. And I know for me, sometimes I say something, but I don't back it up with my behavior or my words, and it falls flat. And the kids look at me, and I know that basically I've lied to them. I didn't mean to do it, but I did. And so I have to remember, if I say something, I have to back it up with the right behaviors to say, yes, I really do mean that. Then, throughout the year, I work on how I speak. So some of the things I say that set more of the tone is, as readers, we do this. As writers, we do this. As scientists, this is how we would. All of those kinds of things make grand assumptions that we're all readers, we're all writers, we're all scientists. Because when you make that assumption, you're not leaving any room for anyone to argue with you, to doubt themselves, or anybody else in the classroom. We're simply saying we are, and this is what we do. And everyone pretty much will follow along, and they start to think of themselves as readers and writers and scientists, because that's the expectation in this classroom. The next piece is by scaffolding, and I know that you already do this. I can't imagine any teacher not scaffolding. We provide input, we provide background knowledge and help students explore their background knowledge. We give students multi-sensory ways of understanding the information, all these millions of ways that we do all the time to help students understand. But these are important pieces as students are learning. If we can provide information in multiple ways, it's going to make them braver and more willing to try because there's something in there, a kernel in there that they actually understood. So providing the right kind of input and helping students understand that there are lots of ways to respond and lots of ways to understand the material, that will give them the courage to actually make those approximations. So another way to support students in making those approximations is by correcting them, but kindly, and doing it in ways that honor their imperfect tries. So it might be something like, great effort. Now let's try it this way. Or, oh, I love what you did here. Let's change this part right here. Or, that's not quite correct, but this piece is good. Let's try improving this section over here. Expecting students to achieve and having a plan to get them there with incremental success is really important. So it's just like riding that bike. We're going to make a lot of mistakes along the way, but those mistakes help us figure out more and more the direction we need to go in. If we don't make the mistakes, then we're not going to actually figure that out, and the learning won't be as deep, and we certainly won't do as good of a job long term. So we want them to make those mistakes. We need to plan for them to make mistakes. Expect students to make mistakes. Be excited about the mistakes and actually say, great, I'm so glad that you did that. It's not quite correct, but let's talk about how we fix that because this is going to help everybody understand this better. So if you can find ways to say that and to correct students in ways that actually honor their try while still correcting along the way. Because we don't want to let the mistakes go and say, oh, there's no wrong answers, because that's not true. And we're harming students by doing that. We do want to correct all of the answers, but we need to do it in a way that honors their try and then moves them forward with trying again. My students know that I don't typically call in students who are not volunteering. However, if there's a student who is never trying, I will put them on the spot, and they do know that, but I will be kind and I will give them the assistance they need to help support answering as best I can. So I might give them a sentence frame to start with. I might give them part of the answer and then ask them to choose between two possible choices to finish it up. Lots of ways that I help kind of support them in learning how to be brave and trying. In addition, I'm always giving students lots of opportunities to answer in pairs, small groups, whole group shout outs. They can answer with whiteboards or they can answer on paper. There's lots of different ways depending on what we're doing where students have opportunities to answer. I want them to have the opportunity to answer as many possible times during the day as I can arrange. And that means that having one student answer and calling on students is not the best way in my classroom because only one student gets to try and only one student gets to learn. Everyone else might be paying attention to what they're saying and learning a little bit from it, but if you're not the mistake maker, you're not learning as much as that mistake maker is. And so I want everyone out there trying and making those mistakes so that we can go in and correct them. Essentially, it's all about having multiple opportunities to try, to answer, and to approximate. It's also about our vocabulary as teachers and how we're responding. So, great effort, but let's try it this way. I love how you did this. Good writers do that, but let's work on this part over here and make it stronger. Or I might say, wow, that took a lot of courage to answer when you weren't sure. Or, oh, you're so close. Let's make your answer stronger by, and tell them what it is that we need to do. There's so many ways to help students approximate and give the best effort that they can. Then they can learn and stretch and grow as we help them form better and better answers. Okay, that's the first piece that helps us form our expectations of students. But here's another piece that's just as powerful, and it's not one that we always think about. How we speak forms our beliefs and vice versa. I want you to think about a time when you heard a teacher or another educator speaking about a student or a parent negatively. Just imagine that conversation, whether you were overhearing it or they were telling you, whatever it was, just imagine that. I can't tell you how often I've heard conversations like that. Speaking about students and their families in anything other than respectful words and tones bodes ill for your relationship, expectations, and interactions with the student and family, and it does not speak well for your students' achievement. Depending on how bad the negativity is ingrained, it can even predispose your students to failure. Yes, I really said that, and I really believe it. We have to reframe our conversations even in our own heads. Truly, there's a reason we say that negative speech and thoughts violates the fifth commandment. We are killing someone else's spirit. We are killing our relationship with them, and we are cutting off their potential by truncating it because we no longer really have high expectations for them. We might say we do, but in our mind, our words are saying something completely different. Now, I know as a teacher that we need to vent sometimes. We just have to. You got to let it all out, right? It's fine to vent, but do it in a way that expresses your feelings, not any negativity about the other person. It's a very, very fine line to walk, but if you're very careful in your speech, put responsibility where it belongs, on them and on you, because it takes two to tango. So what does that sound like? So it might sound like this. I'm so frustrated with the students blurting out and interrupting. He's such a bright kiddo and I want him to do well. I can't figure out a better way to handle the interrupting that will make an impression and that I can actually sustain. I feel like I've tried everything. This helps you let go of some of those feelings without completely blaming someone else for it. Yes, he is blurting out. Yes, he is interrupting, but you're acknowledging good things about him as well. And that you want him to do well. These are important things to say. If you're going to say something about their behavior, you also need to say something about their ability and what it is that you think or hope they can accomplish. Why do I say it takes two to tango? Well, because the fault is never on one side. It always can be shared. And there's usually something that I can be doing that will actually help the situation. And sometimes it's finding a workaround for a negative situation at home or lack of support at home. And that's just the way it is. I can't change a student's home life. And so instead, I find a workaround so I can deal with it in the classroom. It's just the way it is, and it comes with having to just accept what you can't change and then find a way around it and move forward. If I don't, I'm going to be frustrated forever, and unfortunately, negativity is like a disease. Once it takes hold, it just grows and grows and grows, and that is not good. You deserve better than that, and so do your students. So get it out of your speech, find better ways to speak, and guard your thoughts. It really is easy to become negative because there's so many frustrations as a teacher. But if we can find ways to reframe our thoughts and reframe our speech, it can be a game changer. So just a quick recap. Mind your words and thoughts about your students and families all the time. Reframe your thoughts, write it down, rehearse it if needed, whatever it is, but you need to reframe those thoughts. And I find for me, I have to write them down and rehearse them. So I keep it with me and I practice so that I'm really training my brain to think differently about that student or that situation. I form phrases that I'll use with students when they miss the mark. Almost, not quite. Oh my gosh, I love that effort. All kinds of things that I will say to students when they're not quite right and I want to make corrections, but I don't want to discourage them at the same time. I want them to keep on trying and giving me that approximation and being willing to try even when they don't know 100%, so that we can all grow exponentially. I also create a very specific plan for scaffolding and including and enhancing background knowledge throughout my lessons. This is essential in supporting students so that they will be willing to make those giant leaps and very brave, courageous tries in order to make the growth that I really need and want them to make. I have some resources to help you with this. They're all in the show notes. You can grab them at www.hopeineducation.com/vault. So that's it, my teacher friends. We're out of time and I'm out of breath. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you liked today's episode, I'd love it if you'd go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen and leave a review. While you're there, hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss an episode. Also, you can continue the conversation online with me in my Facebook group, the Teach Joyfully Podcast Community, where elementary teachers can connect, get help, and encouragement for all kinds of education and parenting topics. You can find the show notes and links to all the resources mentioned in today's episode on my website at www.hopeineducation.com/podcast. And remember, a happy teacher is a good teacher. Until next time, teach joyfully and take care of you.